In the last 3 or 4 lectures, I do not exactly recall, we have discussed about demand and supply in equilibrium. And by now, we are familiar with the relationship between price and quantity demanded. We know that if price increases, quantity demanded may fall. There are several other factors that affect the demand apart from price, and those factors are income, price of substitute products, and all. This relationship between price and quantity of demanded is known as law of demand. Law of demand tells us about a general relationship, that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. It does not tell us exactly how much quantity demanded will fall if we increase the price. For instance, if we increase the price by 10%, whether demand will fall by 10%. If we increase price by 10%, whether demand will fall by 20%. If we increase price by 10%, whether demand will fall by lower than this. So the law of demand does not tell us about this really. It only tells us about that there is an inverse relationship between the price and quantity demanded. So the gap between this relationship, that how much of quantity demanded will vary if we change one of the determinants of demand, like price, or if price of substitute changes, how it is going to affect the demand. This relationship is, can be explained, can be understood using the concept of elasticity. So in today's lecture, I will discuss about the concept of elasticity, a definition of elasticity in general. Then I will go on to discuss about price elasticity of demand and its determinants. And we will take an example to calculate price elasticity of demand. And in the last part of my lecture, I will talk about the relationship between price and quantity demanded and how it may differ on a linear demand curve. And if time permits, I will also explore today the relationship between price and quantity, the revenue aspect. And in the next lecture, I plan to take up the other aspect of elasticity, like income elasticity and gross elasticity. So let's get going and try to understand what we mean by. This is a scenario that the design for local business is, charges 200 rupees per website. And at this price, 12 websites are sold every month. Now, the website developer wants to increase price to 250. Price is 200, 12, demand is 12, wants to increase price to 250. So what factor should be considered? If you, for example, if you raise price, whether it will bring more revenue, because the revenue is nothing but price into the quantity sold. For example, price is 200. Sorry, price is 200 and quantity is, so total revenue will be. It may be the case if you increase the price to 250, this revenue may fall. Revenue may fall. So that is why the elasticity helps us to understand this. For instance, demand is elastic. And if you increase the price, then total revenue may fall. If demand is inelastic, if you increase the price, revenue may increase. If demand is unitary elastic, then what may happen that there will not have any impact on revenue. So let us try to understand these things one by one, what I mean by this. In general, generally speaking, elasticity means responsiveness of one variable to change in another variable. This is the general definition. For instance, there are two variables, price and quantity demand. How much, for example, change in P, one variable, how it will affect the change in other variable, whether demand will increase or decrease, or income, another variable, if you change this, increase or decrease, how the quantity will be affected of a particular good, or price of substitutes is increase or decrease, how it will affect the quantity. You know that right now I'm exploring the relationship between demand, right? Price elasticity of supply is also there. So all those factors which are behind supply, for example, if price is increased, how much quantity supply, it will affect the quantity supply, and so on and so forth. So all those factors, so it simply means any elasticity is a measure of the responsiveness of one variable caused by change in other variable. If we change one variable and try to find out how it impacts the other variable in terms of we quantify it, then we are discussing about elasticity. So in other words, it is a numerical measure. That is why I said that we have to have a number of the responsiveness of QD or QS to one of its determinants. This is what I have explained. These are the determinants of demand and determinants of supply, cost of production, and so on. So how they my focus will be mostly on demand side, but I will also hint in my last part tomorrow about supply side also. The formula for calculation of elasticity is same. Only thing is that it is looked into in the setting of, in the context of supply. So elasticity of learning is also there. The number of hours devoted, for example, and the learning. So that can also be measured. For example, for that matter, advertising elasticity is also there. If you spend more on advertising, whether it brings or promotional campaign. So any relation, when we try to find out the relationship between change in one variable and other variable by quantifying it, then we are discussing about elasticity. So let us take the first, elasticity concept. So when we are talking about elasticity of demand, so we will take up three main. For example, we will look at the price elasticity, we will look at the income elasticity, we will look at the cross elasticity. Cross elasticity means that the change in demand caused by change in the price of substitute or complements. Okay. This word is cross, C-R-O. Okay, this is not this. This carries a different meaning. Okay, so cross elasticity. So the formula for the price elasticity is percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. Now percentage change in quantity demanded. So I'm sorry. Let me go back to the earlier slide. So price elasticity of demand is simply that percentage change. For example, if quantity demanded changes by 10% and price change is is changed by 10%, elasticity will be 1. If quantity demanded changes by, let us say, 20% and price changes, so elasticity will be 2. If change in quantity demanded, is 8% and price changes by 10%, elasticity will be 0.8. So now we will get a number. Either we will have elasticity greater than 1 or less than 1 or just equal to 1. Now this coefficient which we'll get will be a negative number. It's a -1, -1.2, something like that. Why? Because you know that the relationship is inverse, quantity demanded. That is why if it is positive, negative, so it has to be a negative coefficient. So for it, even if we do not, even if we do not write this thing in terms of price elasticity of demand, it will explain the same thing. It will connote the same thing because it has to be a negative coefficient. So that is why in price elasticity of demand, we do not, if we do not retain the negative coefficient, so it will not affect. But in calculation, we have to be careful. But in income elasticity and cross elasticity, the sign are very important because if you do away with the sign of the coefficient, then the interpretation of those coefficients may, for instance, one writes income elasticity and ignore the sign, so then it may, for example, negative coefficient is there and this sign is ignored. So it means that the relationship, whether it is a negative or positive relationship, one cannot understand. Similarly, plus minus will have a meaning about whether the good is substitute or complement. For instance, if you get a cross elasticity as a negative coefficient in while calculating a cross elasticity of demand, then it implies that the goods are complement. If you increase the price of the demand, if it is positive, then it means that the goods are. So that is why you will retain. Now the $1 million question is that how to calculate the percentage change in demand. The percentage change calculation is very simple. But in here we will make minor tinkering with the percentage calculation. In order to find out percentage change, simply it is the change divided by starting point. From where it start, beginning. Whatever change is there, and we divide it by the starting point. For example, change in price divided by from where, let us say, PO from where it started. This is the formula for calculation of that. But we will see that, and one more thing. Why we take into account percentage? Percentage is a great labeler. No matter how large or small a number is, once we convert into percentage, so it makes a comparison very easy. Otherwise, if it is not in percentage term, that will create a problem. For example, it is a absolute number, we cannot make out easily. So that is why percentage, whatever the number you start with. So if once you convert the percentage change, so that leads to a meaningful conclusion about. So let us take an example to understand how we calculate and why, the formula needs some change. For instance, in this example, price has gone up by, please remember, in numerator it is percentage in quantity demanded. We have to find out percentage, we will do it after a while. Now, if quantity demanded, the price increases by 15%, 10%, and from here to here, and quantity demanded falls by 15%, it means that elasticity is greater than. It means that that demand is more sensitive to the change in price. If it was just 1, means that same percentage, the magnitude of the change in quantity demanded is same. If it was lower than this, then it means that the sensitivity of demand is there, but it is less than the change. So if you look at the demand curve, this is a point I have already explained to you, that because you know that if you are moving up, you know that here this is a positive movement and this is a negative movement. So naturally, when you are calculating the elasticity, it will be negative. This is the same thing which I have just already explained to you. Yeah, I have already explained to you this thing. And this I have already explained to you. For instance, let us assume this, take this example, the earlier example which we had taken, that the website to 212 websites were sold. Quantity was, now it is 250. The quantity demanded, let us say, has fallen to 8. Now, formula for calculation of the elasticity price, percentage in quantity demanded divided by percentage. So if price, let us say, has increased from 200 to 250, quantity demanded has fallen from 12 to 8. So what we do, that we simply subtract 250 minus this, the change in price, divided by the starting point. The starting point is this. And for the quantity, what we will do, that earlier quantity, now quantity is 8 minus 12. So naturally it will be negative number divided by starting point. Okay. So it will be minus 4. Even if you ignore the sign, hardly make any difference, because I have already told you why it will be negative. So it will be, so in this way we can calculate the, but there is a problem. If we use this method for calculation, which we normally do, then it leads to different. For example, if you are asked to find out that price have increased from 200 to 220, a quantity has fallen, you calculate elasticity first. And if you are asked to find out if price has fallen from 250 to 200, then you will get a different number, which is somewhat, implausible, which is, that by increase and decrease, we are getting a different number. So that is why, in order to overcome this issue, what happens that here in this denominator, we take the average quantity and average price. For example, it was 200 plus 250. We take the average of this. It will be 450 divided by it. Similarly, in price, what will do, instead of a starting point, we will take the average price. And then what will happen, that either you calculate the elasticity for increase or decrease, you will get the same number. Otherwise, if you do not do this thing, then what will happen, that if you calculate, this is homework for you, from the increase and decrease, you will get a different number. That is somewhat, difficult to interpret, but for increase and decrease, you will get a different number. So that is why this formula, which we know it for calculation, in numerator, there is no percentage change of quantity or price as it is. But in denominator, instead of starting point, we take the average quantity and average price. So same thing, it is explained here. In my slide, I have already, you are getting a different number from B to A and A to B. For example, if we calculate the price increase here, you get elasticity 1.33, and if you get, then you get 2.50. So two different numbers are getting elasticity. This is huge difference. So that is why if in the numerator, denominator, average quantity is an average price is taken to take into account this discrepancy that results in if we use the traditional method, the standard method for calculation of percentage. And this is called midpoint formula. I would advise you that please use the midpoint formula for this thing. So it is simply end value, that is the, and the change and divided by midpoint. Midpoint will be for quantity Q1, Q2. This is if it is price, change in quantity. If it is for price, it will be P1 and P2 divided by 2. That is the average quantity and average price. So it's taken in count. So it does not matter whether you take it like this, because you know that whether you start the either way, so you will get the same. But otherwise, if you are not doing this thing if you are taking the starting point, and then you will get the different number of coefficient. So using that formula, for example, this is the same example which I have just explained to you, that the price and quantity. Price was the 208 units were sold, 12 units were sold. Price has increased to 258 website. The same has been calculated here. So change, this is the change in the price, and this is the average price. 200 plus 250 divided by 2, so it will be 225. Same here, 8 plus 12 divided by 2, that will this is 10. Other thing remains same, 12 minus 8. The earlier point and like this. So either way, this way or that way, hardly, as I said, that it will be a negative number, so one can arrive at the same thing. So when we divide this percentage change in quantity demanded with this, you get a number which is greater than 1. It means that the price, the quantity demand is sensitive, that the increase in price results in the greater decrease in the quantity demanded, and that is why we get this result. So this is the exam. This is the is a very tired and jaded person, So I think that so if you are asked to find out the calculated price elasticity of demand, either way we calculate it. If we take it from price has gone up from this to this, so you will take it 90 minus 70 is the change in price, and divided this is 20 divided by this 70 plus 90 plus 1, this is 160, which divided by 8, it will be 80. Same way you can find out this will be 200. I'm ignoring the minus sign, and divided by 5 plus 3 is, you take the average divided by 2, it will be 4,000. So in this way, we can find out the percentage and then put the value here, percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. You will get a new. So answer is also given here. So the elasticity is, 2. It means that it is higher than, greater than 1. And greater than 1 simply means, and it is 2, it means that if you increase price by 10%, quantity demanded will fall by twice of this, that is 20%. If it was same 1, then it means that 10% increase or decrease result in 10%. If it was less than 1, 10%, or any number you take it, accordingly you have to interpret it. So that is why sensitivity can be gauged by this. Is price elasticity has got various applications in economics, which we'll discuss. This is how we calculate. Any difficulty if you have, you can ask me before I proceed to discuss about the determinants of price elasticity.
So the midpoint method has been understood properly, but the standard method, I'm still not able to grasp it.
You know it how you calculate the standard method? कैसे percentage calculate करते हैं? Percentage change कहा जाए तो कैसे calculate करते हैं? Standard method तो यही है ना, सिर्फ denominator में फर्क है. This is only thing different. For example, let us go back. For example, price have increased to 90. Okay. So standard method में क्या होगा? Change in price. Change in price, how much is there? 90 minus 70, 20.
20. Yes, sir.
And what is the starting point from where you started? Beginning point.
70.
So you will divide by 70. This is the standard method. This is, you all use it in percentage change. Okay. Because in your simple arithmetic classes of I think junior high school to all, this is the method which you use it, isn't it? I have used the word starting point because that is the beginning value or like that. So these one could keep in mind. Change divided by starting point from where you started, just to keep in mind. This is standard method. So what we have done here, we have made adjustment here. Instead of 70, what we have done here is that we have taken the average of these two.
Yes, sir, got it.
And 160, because the reason is that, for example, if you calculate for increase and decrease, you will get different number. I have already shown you. This is the reason.
Okay, sir, understood.
Now, the next point which I am going to discuss is what are the determinants of price elasticity of demand? Why the elasticity of some product is higher and why it is lower? And when I say that, the classification is, if it is greater than 1, it is called elastic demand, if you get a numerator. If it is equal to 1, it is called unitary elastic. If it is less than 1, it is called inelastic.
Inelastic, yes, sir.
So these are relative measures, okay? So these are, if you get by calculation these coefficients, and I've already told you that you can ignore the sign minus because it has to be, because whenever you are calculating a relationship, this will go up, this will come down, so plus minus will be minus finally. So that is why retain it or do not retain it, it will not. Only thing is that interpretation, what number we are getting it. Question is that when price increases and why some goods are more sensitive and why there are. So there are several factors that affect the elasticity of demand. So let us take one by one. This is an example of two products. One product is breakfast cereal and another is sunny. Now breakfast, this has got various substitutes available. So Indian context में you can write it, जो भी लिखना चाहें आप. You can write. Various substitutes are available. Whereas this may not have many substitutes, or substitution is possibilities are less. So one of the factors that affect the elasticity of demand is that higher the number of substitutes, more elastic will be demand. Because if price of anything increases, consumer will switch to, let us say, if they will switch to demand other product, which is a substitute. So greater the availability of substitute, more elastic will be the demand. So this is one. Then when this is what I have just explained. When close, because there is a possibility, if there is a possibility of substitution is not there, then the consumer will continue to buy despite the fact that prices may have gone up. Then another important thing is the about the goods in question, whether the good is a luxury item or like insulin, which is a necessity. For instance, if price of cruise increases, some people may, decide against availing of that. They may wait till the price, but one cannot do without this. People will die. So even if price of this may have gone up, but those patients, they may have to use it. So that is why if you look at the continuum of necessities are less elastic. I am talking about comparatively, and the products which we can call it like luxurious products, they are more elastic. So this is another important. Price elasticity is higher than fun. So I'm again, please, I do not look at in that. I am talking about the relatively, because there is a possibility, but for insulin or some necessities, you cannot do away with that. One will have to use it. Then another important factor is the time horizon. Time horizon, when we see that elasticity is time horizon, short run or long run. For example, price of anything has increased, and then what may happen that the people may, in the short period of time, they may not substitute it. But in the long run, they will search for substitutes and then they switch over. So that is why the longer is the time period, more elastic will be the demand. Shorter is the time period, lower will be the elasticity. So that is why elasticity will be greater in the long run in comparison to the short run. Then another determinant is how much money you spend on an item. For example, price of salt may have increased. This very paltry amount is in consumer budget. People may continue it because this necessity, and moreover, this is not. But if price of certain other item like housing and others have increased, because that will you use a larger portion of consumer budget, therefore it will be more sensitive. So the elasticity will be greater where which garners greater portion of the consumer's budget, or which takes away greater proportion in comparison to other products. So because that if very minuscule or very small percentage is spent on particular item, the consumer will not bother about that. But it is substantial, it is significant in the consumer, they will be worried. So like, price of housing and paper, they are too, that people will worry more about this because not about this much. So that is why larger the consumer spending on particular item, more elastic will be demand. Lower the spending, less elastic will be demand. So this is in summary. Let us understand this. The extent to which close substitute are, in other words, the greater the substitute number of substitute, more elastic demand. Goods in question, whether in necessities are less elastic. The period elapses, that period, if short run, demand will be lower in comparison to long run. And the amount is spent on a particular thing. Greater the amount is spent, more elastic will be. So these are some of the factors that affect the price elasticity of demand. And please keep in mind, students often make a mistake between when they are asked about elasticity of the determinant of price elasticity of demand, they start writing about the determinants of demand. There is a connection, of course, but elasticity of demand has got its own underlying determinants, So that is why you should be careful. Otherwise, they start explaining that the determinants of demand and determinants of elasticity, they are similar. Although there is a connectedness, but the price elasticity of demand will differ because the factors, the underpinnings of the price is different from the factors that bring about change in demand. Now, certain types of demand curve, that way type of demand curve which we have discussed. this demand curve, that downward sloping. So we know it. Now you should be. So there are in elasticity literature, we come across various type of. So just I will introduce to you what are these different types of demand curve, which you, for example, by looking at the graphics are the, can you say that which for example, if I draw this, if I draw some demand curve like this, if I draw demand curve like this, please keep in mind this is P and Q, quantity demanded. And if, for example, let us take this one, P and Q, and let me extend further. And let us say that price, I increase the price by this. Price, change in price is this much. This change in quantity is this much. You can see here that the change in quantity is greater than the change in price. So if a demand curve is flatter, then the demand is, if you are shown that these, let us take this curve, then it will become clear. P and Q. For example, this is the quantity demand. Let us say that price change is there. Okay. This one. You see the change in price is this much, whereas quantity demanded is this much. You see that price have fallen or increased or decreased, whatever you take it. Whereas change in quantity, it means that the quantity is falling. There is an inverse relationship, but it is less than the change in price. So if you are given two demand curve, one is flatter and one is like this, steeper, slightly steeper. This is I have made very steep. So then you can say that the flatter demand curve will be more elastic than the steeper demand. Now you see this kind of. Now, if you may have a situation where the demand curve, these are some of the theoretical and extreme possibilities, polar cases. Now, here the demand is that any price, quantity demanded remains same. Consider the demand for insulin. Price is this much or this much or this much. Those who are, this quantity will not get changed. This is called a vertical type of demand curve. Is perfectly inelastic. No matter what is the price, but the same may be, because this is necessary. You cannot survive. And for this, for example, price is just for any price, the quantity demanded, unlimited quantity is purchased. So this is a case of perfectly elastic demand. This you will encounter in the third unit in perfect competition. And another case is the rectangle hyperbola, where change in quantity demanded and change in price remain same. So that I will show to you in this graph. This is the curve which I drew, extreme case 1. So whatever is the price, the same quantity, quantity remains same. And here it will be 0, extreme case, because the change in quantity remains same. So that if numerator is 0, then and if price changes by, I think the elasticity will be 0. This case. It is slightly inelastic, but the change in quantity is lower than the change in price. Therefore, it will be less than 1. So it is relatively steeper curve. It is slightly, this curve which I was referring to. Here the change in quantity and change, they are same. For example, if you calculate this area and the area completely this P into Q, they will be same. It is called rectangular hyperbola. So in this case, the price and change in price and change in quantity demanded will be 1 and it will be unitary elastic. And this curve, where the change in quantity demanded is change in price is this much, change in quantity is larger, so percentage change in quantity is greater than 10%, and therefore you will have a value which will be greater than 1 and demand will be the more than 1, the coefficient. And another extreme case is where the price at this any quantity can be produced. Any percentage divided by anything divided by 0 is infinity. So demand will be infinity. So these vertical case and this case are extreme cases, but this demand curve is used in perfect competition to explain that when the firm does not have any control over the price, it can sell at this price any quantity it wants. But in this elasticity, so we have, when we put formula, we will have. So certain extreme cases I have explained to you, but by looking at, for example, if a given that different type and ask that what are how can you label these things, elastic, inelastic, or unitary elastic, or perfect. So one should know about that, these possibilities as well. Now coming back to the formula of elasticity. Okay, let me stop for the day. You can, and then we'll take up this remaining part tomorrow, and we'll take up the why elasticity on a linear demand relation.